Hi there. Although the Sanhedrin absolved Jesus, they left the final decision of his fate in the hands of the crowd of people gathered in the square. One of the members of the Sanhedrin from a corner of the square put his thumb down, visible from far. It took nothing else for the people to do exactly the same. Did that member of the Sanhedrin have any authority at the time he manifested his willingness to put Jesus through his crucifixion and death? No, he had none. He was a member of the Sanhedrin, expressing his own will and not that of the Sanhedrin Council. What was then the reason why the people gathered there followed the suggestion of an authority outside of their duties and condemned an innocent to crucifixion and death? Why does the crowd follow what any authority does, even when the person representing a position of authority is not manifesting anything that has to do with their duty? That same follow the current occurs in our days when it is granted to any person with a position of authority a greater weight in their opinions in situations, circumstances, and matters that have nothing to do with their duty, which is the only reason why they are being given authority for. The authority that receives any political or administrative position is relative to the duties to be carried out, not to the person who could perform them. It is the duty which is accompanied by the required authority to be imposed in the area to which it is directed. As people have submitted to any type of authority, just following the path of not getting into trouble, they fear to contradict or confront a decision different from that assumed by any person with a higher position, and voluntarily submit always with a misunderstanding that being obedient is being good and prevents problems. Obedience to any authority for whatever has reached the extreme of doing the most harmful for humanity just by following what any authority indicates outside of their functions or when they occupy them, even if what it or what they express has little or nothing to do with their duty. To illustrate this a bit better, the fact that many opinions of people in matters of which they don't know enough are considered more valid than others because they have a PhD or a higher education degree would be another example. It also happens when a famous person utters a little phrase that spreads through all the media and whose merit is not superior to the smooth salutation of the neighbor of the corner. Its only merit is that the famous is famous and not always for something that deserves fame. The Sanhedrin Council's member was abusing the misunderstanding and the outer garments and signs that were associated with the position he held in the Sanhedrin to incline people against Jesus. setting an example of how he did it himself. This is called abuse of authority in regard to the member of the Sanhedrin who mentions the Bible, and the very dangerous docility in the case of people standing there and doing the same, even knowing that they were going to collaborate in killing an innocent. None of them deserves forgiveness, neither one nor the others. And the case is that the people continue being killed every day with the same determining factors. The one who abuses the power that, for example, a weapon that kills gives, and the cowardice of those who, knowing it, do not take it away from him or even cover him or collaborate with him. It would help a lot to shape the character of the people if education were concerned with establishing the limits of each other's actions by giving them fundamental and compelling reasons that would guide them to make their own decisions following an ethical basis. Natural law should be imposed as a compulsory subject in all primary and secondary schools courses. From the simplest to the most complex, for being the best ethical compendium that can be learned without religions, beliefs, or superstitions. Give each one what is theirs and defend what belongs to you. Natural law must inform all the legislation because that right invariably identifies the very basis of the existence of any law or invalidates and destroys it. It serves a lot also as an orientation to recognize the difference between the private and the public, and that the powers that be are trying to eliminate with the model of society under surveillance that is being created, in which everyone considers having the right to put their noses in private matters of other people, even when that is a transgression of private and impertinent territory, unless privacy affects or invades the privacy of others. For people who lack these principles, to identify what is theirs, what belongs to them, and differentiate it from what belongs to others, and to understand what belongs to the community, what is public and not private, end up showing their true colors in all sectors of life in society. There is a case that comes to mind and that happened to me recently. In a Spreaker podcast, an internet platform, the host of a pompously called show, which is Truth, Honor, and Integrity Show, mentioned a number of people I know, including super soldiers, doing it in a way that everyone understood, that all were the same group of those he called killers who kill when they hear a trigger word, as some people manipulated by the military under the MKUltra program do. I have recorded and uploaded a podcast to deny and put into question the undeserved accusations from Thomas Williams, who was calling killers to people who never took part in the MKUltra project or this purpose, neither in any super soldier programs with the purpose of making killers or in any other programs. The guy didn't realize that by talking about others and discrediting others, among which I included myself, for having gone through the entire super soldier program. He gave the right to comment on allusions to me and anyone he mentioned, and for having discredited people whose names he mentioned and whom belong all of them to the same blood group to which I belong to. That is, with the same ancestors as mine, and recruited precisely those who were recruited due to those genetic codes common to most of us and so wanted by the military intelligence. I will not go in depth in my response to that individual, as I explained in that first podcast, due to the allusions. And that briefly was that the soldiers are precisely people trained to kill, whose trigger word to do so is simple: fire, and that is it. And those who do that are not called killers who kill when they hear the trigger. They are called soldiers or military. I also mentioned the security agencies and bodyguards, and others that do the same and are not described as assassins by this individual. Thomas Williams justified himself in a later podcast by saying that he had interviewed 3 super soldiers who had told him they were killers, and that seemed to be enough to call all the hundreds of thousands of super soldiers killers, even though a great majority of super soldiers operate in space forces and not precisely on this planet. And what they do is defend the Earth and other places beyond her from hostile attackers. All of this is classified information that the individual seems to have no access to. Without considering that his discredits deserved an answer, he came across criticizing me and my podcast, which incidentally is just a training to develop the use of the sound interface and the dynamics of expressing my opinions. And he also copied 4 themes from my podcast that he introduced into his own without mentioning the theft of the idea, nor where it came from, and therefore crediting the merit of it as if it was his own. Part of what I've said above, referring to natural law, comes here to take part in what I'm telling now. And that is to give each one what is theirs and defend what belongs to us. And with that confusion that characterizes him, Thomas Williams confused a criticism that I made regarding the money that the Mana Trust says he wants to distribute for humanitarian projects, and that I made based on the same principle of defending what belongs to me, what is mine as part of that humanity to which those funds belong, if they exist, of course. Well, all of this that legitimized me to say my opinion about it by allusions and by right was confused by him as an attack on his podcast, which is what he projects and usually does with others, and responded by attacking mine and stealing my topics to include them into his podcast. And as I said before, for those who don't respect the rights of others, what belongs to others, there is only the possibility of continuing to destroy or discredit due to their lack of principles that would allow them to recognize that discrediting others give to the ones publicly discredited the right to defense and a right to their say for that matter. And that the discrediting habit of Thomas Williams doesn't place him above those he so blatantly discredited, but instead places him below the unjustly discredited ones. Because no one would try to pull down the ones of below, wouldn't they? But those that are above, that's the thing. For greater inconsistency, the same individual was proclaiming the need for space military forces in his last podcast, which is precisely the duty that the Super Soldiers program has been developing for decades, with a great sacrifice from its participants, those that Thomas Williams called killers who kill by a trigger. I have been released from the Super Soldiers program after 20 years of service, although my DNA is still used in other space programs. And for the peace of mind of the listeners, I have never used a weapon against anyone on this planet, nor do I think I am capable of doing so. Fortunately, there is an universal justice operating permanently in this disrupted planet, and the individual Thomas Williams is losing audience and winning internal struggles in the foundation he organized to channel those funds from the Manor Trust, that is, public money, and obtain a 2% of commission of it. And so everything is falling apart because there have been many years of speaking ill of others, of disqualifying valuable people with the sole intention of standing above the victims of their discredit, with a wrong basis of believing that in trying to sink others, he stands above them. This is a common and wrong misconception. The only thing the guy does is to develop the technique of throwing garbage on those who do things better than him, or upon those whom are pointing out his wrong policies, whom include threatening those defending themselves from their discrediting with defamation claims. That cannot be so, because the defamations come, all of them, from Thomas Williams to others, which can be checked any time by listening to his show. Not only this, but the misconception he has that anyone pointing out any lie of his, or manipulation of the truth, or wrongdoing is defaming him, even when supported by evidence. It's just wrong. To say something unpleasant that he doesn't like to be told can only be defamation if it is a lie, not ever if it is true. I would be very careful if I was him on any defamation claim. All of them will badly backfire on him. And I will also be very careful if I was him on stealing and robbing ideas, copying themes that others are using for their podcast, or taking others' content without crediting to whom it belongs to. Because maybe, just maybe, this may backfire on him too. Thomas Williams has also confused the followers of the foundation, who are there in order to obtain funds for projects, with the idea that they follow him, that he is leading them. That is common in people of low intelligence, who upload information on YouTube or any other platform and get followers. They think they are leading a lot of people, that people will go where they go, and that they will swallow all their folly as orders or suggestions that must be followed, or be ready for the consequences of not doing so. They assimilate a meme, an authoritarian behavior without legitimate authority. As soon as they try to mobilize those supposed followers or make them shallow incongruities, they realize that it is not so, that they lack the authority or legitimacy to mobilize them, because they are not there looking for a leader. And unless the information they spread is a creation of the one who spreads it, the followers what follow is the information or the money or the line of interviews or the line of news or the line of knowledge, and would do the same and probably more if they switched the presenter of the podcast. I will leave it here for now. Subscribe if you think you can benefit from some critical and rational exercise. That is what I offer. See you soon. Bye for now.